Welcome to the Seneca County Industrial Development Agency Audit Committee meeting. So we've got a quorum, and we're going to first go for the approval of the committee meetings from September 20th. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes of the meeting?
So moved.
And a second?
You'll have a second.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed. Next is the presentation and recommendation for the audit and management letter. And that is in the booklet, right?
Yep, so we're gonna turn it over to John and he will walk everybody through.
Hi, John. We met last year.
Yep. Hey everyone, so I'm John Rinkowitz from Engel Metzger Bar. So we're the auditors. We came in and took a look at your records and put together a financial statement. And so you have copies of the financial statement, the letter of communication, which is just a required communication under our auditing standards. There's a management letter, which is where we communicate any recommendations we have there. You also have a single audit report, and I'll just get them all done at once if that's okay with you. And lots of good information in those reports. They're put together based on our accounting and auditing standards. But my firm will put together this first document, this financial executive summary. So this helps us just kind of focus on the statements themselves and really deal with the numbers and the activity there. So I'll walk you through this document, but please ask me any questions on the financial statements or any of the other communications if you would like to. So if we go to page 1 of the executive summary, so this is a combined balance sheet, statement of net position at the top, and income statement changes of net position at the bottom for the IDA. So the IDA has a general operating fund and a revolving loan fund. Okay, and these are the combined numbers for those. And I'm just going to touch on these briefly, and we'll go through the individual funds right after this, just to mention what we have here, and then talk a little bit about the report. So the report itself has an unqualified opinion on it. So that's the opinion you want, so no modifications there needed based on our audit. Clean opinion, that's what you're looking for. Included also in the financial statements is required by the New York State and the ABO. There's a report on your investments, so we're required to report whether you're following your investment policy. We've included that. That's also a clean opinion, so which is pretty straightforward. The IDA doesn't have anything other than some deposit accounts, so you're not getting involved in anything. So there's that. The management letter, so we're required to report whether you have any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in your internal controls. We did not identify any of those. So those would be the serious issues that we recommend you really need to address because your statements could be misstated without addressing those. And we didn't have any of those. In addition, we didn't have any recommendations regarding your internal controls this year, which is very good. And we didn't have any last year. And this is very positive because you folks that have been around for a couple years, you go back a few years, there were a number of items that we had recommendations.
I know that the transition to that new system was a little rough, but yeah, that's great.
Yep. So, and we love to see our recommendations get implemented. And
Shouldn't there be like a gold star on the front of it?
Exactly. Yeah. So very good job there. That letter of communication I mentioned, which is basically just our auditing standards, just has some required items we're supposed to put in there. And again, included in that, we didn't have any disagreements with management over the way the audit progressed. There was no outside consultant or consultation with other auditors. We're required to report risks And we have standard risks that are in every audit, which is management override of internal controls and revenue recognition. And we communicated that when we did our planning meeting for the audit. So nothing new or in there. So basically lots of clean reports. So we're in good shape there. And that's what I wanted to touch upon on that. We're going to move forward to the next couple pages and kind of walk through your operating fund. Okay, so page 2 here is the operating fund in that position. This is your trial balance, your balance sheet. We have comparative statements. You can see where things were last year compared to where they were this year. Okay, and in the assets section, you can see what changed there. And receivables, really, it's more just timing of things and based on the number of projects you have this year. Scrolling down into net position and all that, we see a decrease in your net position, and we'll talk about that in a second, just going into the next statement, which is your operating. So had a couple things go on, not a lot of activity revenue-wise, so your revenues weren't sufficient to cover your current normal operating expenses. In addition, moving into the new building, we recognized some losses on improvements you had in the old building. And then at the Deer Run Industrial Park, there had been some land that had transferred over to the town to for the roads and the lighting, and we just recognized that, hey, that you don't own that property anymore. So we took the opportunity to recognize that this year. And when we go to the next page, we'll see all that come together. But that's really kind of the big changes that happened here. So if we go to the next page, right, so the summarized changes in that position. So again, a fancy word for income statement. And we can see your activity year to year. And operating activities up at the top, really the big change is the agency fees. So you had 4 projects last year, you only closed 1 project this past year. Okay. Rent and lease income, that's the Del Lago payment. So you had an agreement with them for 10 years of payments for $100,000, and this is the last year for that agreement. So that source of income is going to go away moving forward. Okay. Down in the non-operating revenues, you had a grant, a Willard study for best use of some land. A feasibility study was done last year. You received some grant funds for that last year. So that's really kind of the big change there. We do see some increase in interest income. Rates are very good, and so we do see more money there. But, continue to... don't place too much reliance on that because we never know where interest rates are going to go. And then, as I mentioned, down in the non-operating expenses, this is where we see those losses due to the transfer of land to the town, which is that land allocation, and the impairment of assets. So the improvements to the bill, to the prior office were still being depreciated when you moved out, so we had to write those off because we don't have those anymore. Okay.
I had questions on that myself. I went through and compared the year-end totals to the audit numbers,
Mm-hmm.
and there was 5 or 6 items that were where we had differences. Understanding the complexity of the capital assets
Mm-hmm.
and writing those off because of the transfers.
Yeah.
There was one item, though, that there was an adjustment to the pension expense.
Okay, so the current guidance, and if we go back to the balance sheet, we can see the impact of the guidance requires that under the current guides, you participate in the New York State pension system, and the accounting guidance says that whole pension system as a whole has to be audited and come up with basically a determination of how funded it is. And if it's underfunded, then all the participating municipalities have to recognize their liability in that underfunded piece. And if it's overfunded, you get an asset on the books. What's the meaning of that? I'm not really sure. right? Because if you put an asset on your books, what is that? I don't know. It's nothing, right? You can't spend it or borrow on it or anything. If it's a liability, you can't pay it, right? It just sits there, right? You have no control over it. The plan has an actuary come in, make this determination of how funded it is. They determine the allocation for each organization that participates based on how many people you have there, what your portion of that is, and then they tell you what those numbers are. And
Now,
that's,
how big a pool is that? Is that the whole state?
yeah, all the municipalities that
Wow.
participate in that, yep. So, in fact, well, if you want to look at it, the supplemental schedules and the financial statements actually show the history of the last 10 years of the payments that you've had to make into the plan, and it actually shows what that percentage is, and it's a fraction of a percent that you folks.
It ended up being a $16,000 adjustment.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And again, you have very little control over it,
Mhm.
unfortunately. So
And
you,
it's also completely dependent on interest rates, because that's what's moving the fund up and down.
Yeah. Yep. So how well it does compared to its own estimates and that kind of thing. So you have very little control over it. And again, there's not much you can do with it. You have a liability. You're not going to pay because you pay based on how the way they bill you and fund it. So unfortunately, that's what it is. But that's where that variance would come in. Okay. So that's the operating fund. Any other questions on the operating fund before we move forward? Okay. So the next, page 4, the revolving loan fund. So the changes here. Currently 2 outstanding loans there. So no new loans issued this year. But the loans that you do have are making payments, being fully collectible, so no allowances against those. We did perform a single audit, so the feds require if you receive or spend more than $750,000 worth of federal dollars in any one year, you're required to have a specific compliance audit, they refer to it as, on those dollars, the way even though you don't really receive money for this, the way we have to calculate what that number is, which comes directly from the federal government, you're over $750,000. I think it's 760 or something in that range. The news on that is that for the next year, that threshold's going up to $1 million because they changed the laws on that. So wouldn't necessarily need a single audit next year for that. So it'll save you a little headache. It was a clean opinion, clean audit on that, but was a required audit that we did. And that's basically the revolving loan fund for right now. So, that's the activity there. So any question on the statements or any of the reports or?
Nope, all looks good.
Kelly, do you
Yes.
have, I don't have a copy of the summary, so if you could.
Oh, there was packets, they're in the, grab that.
Here. Only one comment, John, and
Yep.
it's just on the first page, there's a typo in the net position for 2024.
This is on the executive summary or on the?
On the executive summary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, cause it lists our net position. I think it added a digit in there. It looks like a 4. So the net position beginning of year 2024 is 39 million instead of 3.9 million. And then that obviously impacts end of year.
Wow, yes, I would say so.
If you compare end of year 2023, yeah, it looks like
Yeah.
a 4 got added in.
Yep, so that should be the same as the previous year, which is 3,908,817, which would give you the 3,593,606 above. Yep, and this is why you're supposed to have,
These
the admins
two
do these
Yeah,
columns
updates
at the
and
bottom, so
that.
2024, and then it throws off obviously the
Yep.
variance
But
column. 'cause all
it's
these are-
But this is not what, this is a communication just for the
Yes.
board, it won't go for, the,
Oh, yeah,
you're
'cause I already
taking
looked
action
through the
on
audit, I
that.
didn't
Yep,
notice
yep,
anything.
you're
in
taking
the
action on the
actual-
audit, yep, so.
The audit
Statements.
looks okay.
Yeah.
The audit numbers are good.
Yes.
Although this is wrong.
Yeah,
Apologize for that.
that's okay.
That's a typo.
Yeah. Yeah, Excel works great until you screw something up and then it doesn't work so
We'll still
good.
do the calculations for you, yeah.
Yeah, and that position went up by $35 million.
Nothing wrong with that, not bad.
It would have been a really good year. Okay. So does anybody else have questions or comments related to either the IDA audit or the single audit?
Do we need a motion to accept as
Yes, we'll do them separately.
with a recommendation to the full board for ratification at its next meeting?
Okay. So can I have a motion to accept the management letter first, the audit and management letter?
So moved.
And I'll second.
Kelly will have to do a roll call.
Mr. Guthrie,
Yes.
Mr. Cure,
Yes.
Mr. Murray, absent, motion carried.
Then a second motion to accept the single audit.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Guthrie,
Yes.
Mr. Cure,
Yes.
Mr. Murray, absent, motion carried.
Okay, do we have other business?
We do not.
Do I have a motion for adjournment?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Done.
Okay. So then, we don't have a quorum for the EDC, so we'll have to move on to the funding corp. Which would be Ralph and Bob. Volunteer to chair this committee meeting.
Yes.
All right, Bob, take it away.
All right, let's see here. All righty. The first item is the approval of the audit committee meeting minutes of September 20th, 2024. Accept the motion to approve.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Is there a second?
You'll have to
That would be you.
I'll second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The presentation of the funding corp audit.
Great. Excellent, okay. So for the funding corp, I don't have an executive summary, so we're just gonna take a quick look at the financial statements themselves. And so you should have a copy of the financial statements, management letter, and a letter of communication for the funding corp.
It's like tucked in the back of that bid packet everybody had.
Yeah.
Okay. So, the funding corp, again, we have a financial statement, clean audit opinion on the reports, so that's what you're looking for. And just to talk a little bit about it, so if we go to page 6 and 7 of the report, you'll see your balance sheet and income statement. And so there were no new projects this year, no new bonds issued, so we don't have any additional fees brought in this year. And your expenses are really just kind of your ongoing expenses you have every year. So professional services, which includes our audit fee, there's some insurance and some other expenses. So your normal operating expenses that were here, you did allocate a little bit more expense this year, so that's fine. So the unfortunate news is basically regardless of the fact that there's really not much activity happening at the funding corp, the current rules and laws are that you have to submit an audited financial statement every year, and it's in fact has to comply with governmental auditing standards, which makes that even more complex and expensive. So unfortunately, you have that ongoing expense in this corporation moving forward. So, continue to look for, short of reaching out to the ABO, hopefully you can try that, or working with your state rep to see if they can go to Albany and request some kind of exception for this, to not submit this report. This is going to be an ongoing expense. This is going to be the audit for this. And currently you have enough funds to continue paying for a number of years. But at some point you'll have to make other provisions or make some decisions there. So still doing okay right now, fund balance wise. Continue to look for new projects and that kind of thing to help provide some additional income. Look for opportunities for that. Okay.
I would point out there were no audit adjustments.
No adjustments. Yep.
With that being said, accept the motion to approve the,
So moved.
is there a second? A second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Again, this will be presented as well at the next board meeting, full board meeting,
Mhm.
for ratification.
We don't have any other business.
Is there a,
We'll need a motion to adjourn and
Does
then
that
we'll
require a
be
roll
done.
call?
We'll have to
It's okay,
Oh,
they did, yeah.
Okay,
convene
I wasn't
a
sure.
That's okay.
EDC meeting at
I
some
wasn't sure
point.
of the
Yeah.
format.
Know when you need to do it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we'll,
could it be done before the board meeting?
I'm wondering if we can maybe tack it on just before the board meeting. I don't know, ideally we'd like to have a little bit of time, because this is technically meant to be a draft review, so that if the committee sees things, although obviously we've already gone through as staff, we've gone through all of the audits, thoroughly, and haven't seen anything that
I also
should
reviewed,
be cause for concern.
there were no audit adjustments for EDC as
No,
well.
so I'll have to verify with Rob Halpin just to make sure that we would run into no issues doing it that way, but we could potentially just start our meeting next week with the EDC audit committee. Obviously, we just wouldn't have the benefit of having John there, but it's not a big deal, that was a very simple audit and we can present it.
That being said, I ask for a motion to adjourn the funding court meeting.
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned.